Ms. Frances Richards was connected with the College Heights Herald for nearly 40 years. The late Ms. Richards, a member of the WKU English faculty, was thrust into the editor's role in 1925 when Dr. Cherry announced at chapel services that the institution would be publishing a newspaper and that she was to be the editor. It took Ms. Richards by surprise, but she remained a fixture with the College Heights Herald for nearly 4 decades. And tomorrow they'll have a brunch in here in her honor, which they have every year. She provided the foundation for the nationally recognized newspaper that today is housed in this building. Ms. Richards.
The first and only journalism teacher at Western for much of her career, Frances Richards is undoubtedly one of the most loved and respected teachers to lead a classroom on the Hill. She began her teaching career at Western in 1925, and one only has to listen to former students to know she was something special.
And when I came here in '29, she was one of the brightest, sharpest, sweetest young teachers in the department, and had already been here and been doing the College Heights Herald for 4 years at that time. Later, she taught Shakespeare, but she wasn't teaching Shakespeare at that time, and it just so happens by accident that I never did have a class under Miss Richards, and I've always regretted it.
I started taking classes under Miss Richards in journalism. I took everything that we offered. I constantly on registration would check the schedule to see what she was teaching, and if she was teaching, I wanted it, because she was that inspiring a teacher.
Miss Richards' love for teaching and students led her to serve as the advisor to Western's College Heights Herald for 39 years, although the first edition of the student newspaper was a challenge, according to former English department head Dr. Wilson Wood.
And she was telling about how she got along that first year with that newspaper, and said when Dr. Leeper, who was one of the best brains in the English department at that time, and was head of the department just before Dr. Wilson, he helped her with it a great deal. And after they got it all put together and sent it to the printer, when it came back, she said it was a terrible mess. It was so full of errors, she said, and I'm quoting exactly what she told Lowell, "He cussed and I cried."
The concerns about the newspaper were short-lived, as the Herald captured several awards under Richards' guidance, including the medalist distinction from Columbia University 8 times. The Herald and the journalism department's outstanding reputation today can easily be linked to the dedicated educator and 1992 Hall of Distinguished Alumni honoree, Frances Richards.
On behalf of Frances Richards, I'd like to express appreciation to those who made this possible tonight. Frances will be so pleased knowing that she's in the first group. She'll be pleased knowing that she's the first woman, but she'll be highly honored knowing the nature of the makeup of this group that's being honored tonight, these 9 men. These 9 men, most of them except for Dr. Thompson, I'd never met until tonight. But I've heard about them all my life. In fact, gentlemen, I probably know some things about you all that you forgot a long time ago. But I heard Aunt Frances say so many kind things about you and so many good things about you. She appreciated your accomplishments and the high standards that you set for yourself, and she loved you very much. She loved Western very much. She loved its students, its faculty, its staff, and the mission that Western had in the role of higher education. Frances had the unique ability, in my opinion, that she could take a typical student-teacher relationship, nurture that relationship, and convert it into a lifelong friendship. And these friendships are what sustained her throughout her entire life. She loved Western and its students. She had a particular spot in her heart for those people that worked for so many years, the young men and women of the College Heights Herald, and for a time on the Talisman staff. And there's another group of people that she used to pay a lot of tribute to that were near and dear to her. And I imagine some of them are seated in here tonight. And this is not a quote that she originated, but it's a quote she used quite often. It's something she liked to say: "The great soldiers who passed through the goalpost," referring to the men and women who went out and fought our country's wars here in the 20th century. They were near and dear to her. As Aunt Frances got older, she died last year at the age of 97, by the way. As she got older, she tended to be more introspective, especially the last year of her life, and she tended to look at the past more than the future, which is understandable. And being educators, my wife and I used to go over, we would have the summers off, and we would go over and just about every morning and drink coffee with Frances and her sister Mary Ellen. And she, somewhere in the conversation, Frances would say, "You know, Joe, last night I couldn't go to sleep for a while, and I tried counting sheep, and that didn't put me to sleep, so I tried to name all the Western's presidents in the order in which they served. And she says, invariably, there's always one that I cannot think of. And that president was Dr. Paul Garrett. Now, Dr. Paul Garrett was a man she loved and respected, but for some reason, at the age of 97, she could not remember Dr. Paul Garrett. Well, this sort of got to be a joke of my wife and me, because she brought it up every day. And we finally got to the point that on the way over to drink coffee, my wife rose and say, "Well, we need to go over and straighten Aunt Frances out about Dr. Garrett." But she loved him. She loved all the Western's presidents. In fact, she thought most of Western's presidents were right ready for sainthood. And Western's presidents were nice to her. And she appreciated that, and so do we. My father used to poke fun at Frances, his sister, saying, "Frances, most people, when they die, they hope to go to heaven." He said, "You're going to be interested in just getting back to Western and Bowling Green." So here tonight in the Paul L. Garrett Student Center, or Conference Center, perhaps my father's prophecy has come true. Perhaps Frances Richards has returned to Western. Thanks to you that made it possible.